Evelyn stood very still when Claire's words hit her like a slap. Claire was in Daniel's kitchen, the wedding dress hanging behind her like a white flag, and she said loud and calm, "The best gift would be if you disappeared from our family." Daniel nodded without looking, as if agreeing on the price of milk. Evelyn's chest tightened. She remembered when Daniel had been a small boy, when he wanted piggyback rides and spilled juice on the carpet. Now his hand rested on Claire's hip and he said flat, "This is supposed to be our special weekend. Your negativity is ruining everything." Evelyn's voice surprised even her. "Where exactly am I supposed to go?" Claire examined her nails. "A hotel. Your sister's. I don't care as long as you're not here tomorrow." Evelyn felt each word settle like cold stones in her stomach, but she kept her tone steady. She had spent the morning arranging flowers, the afternoon tying bows, the evening listening to Claire find fault with every vendor. "The only negative thing I said was about the swan ice sculpture," she told them. Claire's smile was the same smile Evelyn had watched on magazines. Glossy, practiced. "You just gave us some money once," Claire said, turning it into a dismissal. Daniel chimed in. "She's been handling the finances." Evelyn looked around the kitchen, the granite they had chosen, the custom cabinets her money helped buy, and felt the slow, heavy shift inside her. It wasn't panic. It was a gear clicking, something changing direction. "You're right," she said softly. "I should go." The surprise on Claire's face tasted like triumph. Upstairs, in the room they insisted on calling the guest room, Evelyn folded her clothes with hands that had packed school lunches and holiday suitcases for 40 years. She paused at the photograph of Thomas on the nightstand. 43 years of marriage, a life where she'd never felt unwelcome. She whispered to his framed face, "I'm not going down without a fight," though she hadn't decided the fight's shape yet. She drew her phone and dialed Margaret Clark, the lawyer who had helped her since Thomas's death. Margaret answered sleepily, then went sharp when Evelyn explained. "Pull the house purchase documents, everything," Evelyn told her. Margaret hesitated only a moment before asking, "Do you remember the additional papers you signed after you worried about Claire's spending?" Evelyn's heart picked up speed. "I don't remember signing anything else," she said. Margaret's voice over the phone was businesslike and steady. "The $87,000 wasn't a gift, Evelyn. It was a loan. You're on the deed as co-owner for 35%. Evelyn almost dropped the handset. She could see through the window Claire trying on her veil and laughing, oblivious to the legal math about to change her life. Margaret explained the options: buyout, forced sale, split proceeds, each word a tool that could be used or swung. Outside, Daniel popped a champagne cork and raised a glass to the future. Evelyn pressed the phone to her ear and watched him through the kitchen's garden window. He toasted a world she had built and now might dismantle. "Prepare a notice of intent to sell," she told Margaret. Margaret asked if she was sure. Evelyn felt the certainty settle like armor. They wanted her gone, fine. She would leave, but with her share. Evelyn rang Willowcrest Country Club and asked for the catering manager. Jessica answered, surprised. "Tomorrow," she said. Evelyn's voice was crisp. "Cancel the reception. Send me the cancellation bill." She had signed the contract. The deposit and the card were under her name. There was a small, secret thrill in the act of pulling a single thread and watching a plan wrinkle. 20 minutes later, Evelyn checked into a modest hotel across town and ordered room service with a little flourish of someone reclaiming simple rights. At 11:47 p.m. her phone screeched with Claire's voice on the line. "Hi," terrified. "You honored my request," Claire screamed. Evelyn was calm. "You wanted me to disappear. I disappeared." Panic made Claire brittle. "You can't cancel our reception. 200 people are coming." Evelyn listened, then said, "You can still get married. You just won't have a paid reception." The sobs on the phone sounded ugly and practiced, the kind that once might have wrung Evelyn's heart. "I didn't mean forever," Claire wailed. "You meant permanently," Evelyn replied, and let the sentence hang. Daniel begged for reason. Evelyn let him speak and then answered with an inventory of small generosities he had never treated as debt. grocery money slipped into envelopes, utility bills paid without ceremony, emergency cash that smoothed each crisis. Daniel's voice went thin when she named a number. $37,000. He stared like someone hearing distance measured in a foreign currency. Evelyn spent breakfast with a Sunday paper and a deliberate ease that annoyed her own conscience a little. Her phone filled with missed calls and frantic texts, each notification a comet streak of panic. At 9 there was a knock. Daniel stood in the doorway wearing the tired edges of a tuxedo shirt. He told her Claire had locked herself in the bathroom. Claire's mother was flying back from California. The wedding was falling apart. He pushed past her into the hotel room as if force could crowd out consequence. Evelyn let him. She remained standing, eyes steady, while he tried to make the argument she'd been braced for. "Come back, Mom. Let's talk." Evelyn sat like a judge hearing pleas and said, "Do you remember the last time you called just to talk, Daniel? Or my birthday before Facebook reminded you?" He fumbled with words until Evelyn stacked facts. $87,000 for the down payment, $37,000 in further help, $124,000 in invisible scaffolding holding their lifestyle. "We were always going to pay you back," Daniel said, near tears. Evelyn let the air fill with the weight of his phrase. "Were you?" she asked. Silence bruised the minutes. She told him she would not be anyone's endless bank. She would not vanish because Claire demanded optics. She would not accept that her worth was measured only by what left her accounts. The room pulsed with the quiet of someone caught between love and principle. Daniel's face showed the first thin lines of panic beyond the social embarrassment. How would they manage without the quiet stream she'd supplied? Evelyn explained, with the steady simplicity of someone used to counting, that she owned 35% of the house. "You can buy me out or we sell," she said. Daniel blinked like a man hearing an unfamiliar language. "We can't afford to buy you out," he whispered. "The house is worth $300,000. 35% is a little over $100,000. Evelyn had known that. She had not wanted to humiliate them so much as to force them to feel the gap between independence and dependence. She told him matter-of-factly that she had spent years making up their difference. The groceries, car repairs, insurance, those little raises of a life they believed they earned on their own. There was one last phone call that morning. Jessica at Willowcrest telling her Claire's mother had offered to pay and reinstate the reception. Evelyn smiled in the way of someone with business sense. "Tell her no," she said. "The cancellation stands." She would settle the bill herself. The point was not money but dignity. "This is about respect," she told Daniel, leaning forward in the hotel chair so he had to meet her eyes. "When you tell someone their best gift is to disappear, you've measured their worth by absence." Daniel's mouth opened and closed like a man trying to catch a sound. For the first time the roles shifted. The child pleading softened into an adult suddenly learning the cost of assumed security. Margaret sent the notice Monday morning. Evelyn watched the small legal words like missiles on a page and felt strangely buoyed, as if truth in black ink could be a raft. News traveled quickly. Friends and neighbors murmured. Family members who had avoided entanglement called with careful sympathy. Evelyn fielded messages with a new, cool precision. Claire's posts on social media grew frantic and dramatic. Pictures of a bride with a smile pasted thick, captions about resilience and love. Evelyn read them and felt nothing like anger, only a calm that tasted like spring. She had never wanted to destroy anyone's day. She wanted to be seen. That, it turned out, required action. Daniel tried bargaining. "Buy time," he said. "Let us find a buyer or a loan. We'll get you the money." Evelyn had already run the numbers in her head. Extending kindness indefinitely was how she had gotten here. She could negotiate a timeline, she could structure repayment, but she refused to be gaslit into gratitude that disguised entitlement. "I will accept a fair market buyout," she told him. "Otherwise, we sell and split according to ownership." It was business. It felt like a strange new intimacy, setting terms in a family that had always traded love for convenience. Daniel's shoulders folded. The negotiations began with a clumsy grace of people learning adult boundaries. The wedding went on, but it was not the same thing. Claire's face at the altar carried the hollow glare of someone furious that celebration required decorum. Daniel's hand trembled where it held hers. Guests whispered. Relatives texted updates to each other like weather reports. Evelyn sat with a friend who had come to support her and watched the ceremony as an outsider with the power to choose. She could disrupt the vows, call out the hypocrisy in front of everyone, but she did not. Her message had been delivered in other ways. The reception hall remained empty of the dishes she had paid for. Photos later would show laughter, but Evelyn knew how fragile such pictures were. A smile can be stitched into an album while debts remain. After everything, Evelyn took a long walk through a park near the river, the air sharp and clean as if the city itself had been washed. People jogged and walked dogs. A child's bright kite cut the sky. She felt lighter in the way of someone who had set down a burden and discovered the arms felt free. Yet there were edges of grief. She missed Thomas sometimes with a sudden ache. Other times she was angry at the quiet that had been filled by years of giving without asking. On her phone a text from Daniel came. "We can do this, Mom. We'll make it right." Evelyn typed back. "Then start by understanding why I had to make it right for myself." Word spread about the house notice. Some family members took Evelyn's side. Others judged her as a woman who had let money change her heart. Evelyn laughed at the absurdity. Money revealed character, yes, but it also revealed practical truths about survival. She started to meet with a real estate agent, listened to figures and schedules, and imagined a life that did not require asking for permission to exist. She called Margaret and set plans into motion. An orderly process, methodical, not vindictive. In quiet moments she found herself thinking of small pleasures she had shelved. A pottery class she had always meant to try, friends' book club nights she had missed, lunches where she'd been present without handing out bills. Claire stormed into the lawyer's office 2 days later. Red lipstick smudged like a battle mark. Margaret had invited Evelyn to be present, and she sat calmly while Claire threw words like darts. "This is cruel," Claire hissed. "She's ruining our lives." Margaret folded her hands neatly. "Mrs. Gray owns 35% of the property. She has every legal right to sell or demand a buyout." Daniel shifted in his chair, torn between his bride and his mother. Evelyn said nothing until the silence became unbearable. Then she leaned forward. "Cruel is asking someone to disappear after draining them dry. This is business, Claire. Nothing more." Claire's eyes flashed, but her words faltered. Daniel rubbed his temples and whispered, "What do we do now?" Evelyn answered softly, "Grow up. Start living within your means. Stop expecting me to fix everything." That evening Daniel called Evelyn privately. His voice cracked raw. "Mom, Claire's furious. She says you're punishing us." Evelyn sighed, staring at the lamplight on her hotel desk. "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm protecting myself." Daniel's tone slipped into pleading. "She's talking about annulment, about walking away. Everything's falling apart." Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling both sadness and vindication. If she can't handle financial responsibility, maybe you should ask yourself what foundation this marriage rests on. He groaned. "I love her, Mom. I can't just walk away." Evelyn's voice softened. "Love without respect becomes a trap. And respect without honesty is hollow. You'll have to decide which you value most." On the other end, Daniel said nothing. She could almost hear him thinking, weighing the words against the mess of his new reality. Evelyn returned to her modest house across town, the one she had downsized into after Thomas passed. It was quiet, small, and smelled faintly of lavender from the sachets she kept in drawers. She walked through the tidy rooms and realized how little she truly needed. Her neighbor, Mrs. Lewis, waved from across the fence. "Heard about the wedding disaster," she said, half whispering. Evelyn chuckled. "Word travels faster than light." Mrs. Lewis leaned closer. "You finally stood up to them, didn't you?" Evelyn nodded. "It was overdue." They shared tea at the kitchen table, and Mrs. Lewis clapped her hand gently over Evelyn's. Sometimes protecting yourself is the bravest gift you can give. Don't let anyone twist it into cruelty. Evelyn smiled, warmth spreading in her chest. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like the villain in her own family story. Days passed, and Daniel visited again, looking worn down. His tie hung loose, his eyes bloodshot. "Mom, we can't manage without your help," he admitted. Evelyn raised her brow. What happened to all the confidence? He sat heavily on her couch. Bills, credit cards, mortgage. "We're drowning." Evelyn poured him a cup of coffee but didn't soften her tone. "I've been telling you for years. You spend more than you earn. That's not sustainable." He buried his face in his hands. "Claire blames you for everything." Evelyn set the cup before him. "Claire blames me because it's easier than facing the truth. But denial won't pay the mortgage." Daniel looked up, desperation in his eyes. "So, you're really going through with this sale?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "Unless you come up with the money to buy me out. That's the choice." Word reached Claire's parents, who requested a meeting. Evelyn agreed, curious. They sat in a glossy cafe downtown, the hum of businesspeople filling the air. Mr. Hartman leaned across the table. "Evelyn, let's be reasonable. We can give you a little money to step back quietly." Evelyn stirred her tea calm. "You misunderstand. I don't want a handout, I want my fair share." Mrs. Hartman frowned. "But it will embarrass our daughter. People will talk." Evelyn met her eyes steadily. "Your daughter told me to disappear. I'm only honoring her wish. If the gossip bothers her, maybe she should reconsider how she treats people." Silence fell. Mr. Hartman cleared his throat. "What if we bought your share?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "That would solve everything. Do you have 100,000 in cash?" Their discomfort answered for them. She sipped her tea unshaken. The community buzzed with whispers. At the grocery store, acquaintances stopped Evelyn with raised brows. "You really cancelled their reception?" one asked. Evelyn answered honestly. "Yes. Paid for it. I cancelled it." Some shook their heads. Others secretly admired her courage. One woman whispered, "I wish I had your backbone with my daughter-in-law." Evelyn realized she had become a quiet symbol, a story people repeated, the mother who refused to be walked over. It was both liberating and strange. At night she lay awake sometimes, wondering if she'd gone too far. But then she remembered Claire's smirk in the kitchen, Daniel's cold agreement, and her resolve hardened again. Respect, once lost, was not easily found. And Evelyn knew she could never go back to being the silent provider, invisible in her own child's life. Claire's anger boiled over on social media. She posted cryptic captions about betrayal, about being abandoned, about evil disguised as family. Photos showed her with friends, raising glasses defiantly. Evelyn's phone buzzed constantly with forwarded screenshots. Her cousin called, whispering, "She's painting you as a monster." Evelyn simply replied, "Let her." She had no desire to defend herself in the court of public opinion. Instead, she focused on her garden, trimming roses and planting marigolds. Dirt under her fingernails brought more peace than any online validation. When Mrs. Lewis stopped by again, she commented, "They can scream all they want online. Truth doesn't live on Facebook." Evelyn chuckled. "You're right. Truth lives in contracts, deeds, and numbers. And in how people treat each other when no one's watching." The roses bloomed brighter that week, as if the earth agreed with her. Daniel came once more, this time without warning. He looked pale, thinner, like the weight of two worlds sat on his shoulders. "Mom," he began quietly, "Claire left. She went to her parents' house." Evelyn studied him, then motioned for him to sit. "I'm sorry to hear that." His eyes filled with tears. "She says I chose you over her. That I'm weak. That she can't build a life with someone who depends on his mother's money." Evelyn's voice was gentle but firm. "Maybe she's right, Daniel. Not about weakness but about dependence. You've leaned on me too long." He shook his head. I never wanted it like this. Evelyn touched his hand softly. Then change it. Stand on your own. Show her and yourself that you can. He stared at her, speechless, the truth heavier than his grief. Evelyn met Margaret again at the office. Papers spread across the table like tiles in a puzzle. The market is strong, Margaret explained. If we list now, the house will sell quickly. Evelyn nodded, though part of her heart twisted. Selling the house meant tearing away Daniel's foundation. Margaret studied her face. You're hesitating. Evelyn sighed. It's my son's home, even if he's forgotten who built it. Margaret leaned forward. Evelyn, sometimes the only way to save a relationship is to end the unhealthy patterns. Selling may hurt now, but it will force him to grow. Evelyn tapped her finger against the deed. She remembered Daniel's boyhood laughter in the backyard, the birthday parties, the scraped knees. Then she remembered his cold eyes in the kitchen. Finally she whispered, "List it. It's time." Margaret nodded, already dialing the agent. The real estate agent, a cheerful woman named Sonia, toured the house with Daniel and Claire's absence looming like a ghost. Evelyn walked beside her, pointing out the features she had paid for. The granite counters, the hardwood floors. Daniel trailed silently, shame etched across his face. Sonia smiled professionally. This will attract buyers quickly. Evelyn felt both pride and sorrow. Outside, Daniel finally spoke. Mom, please reconsider. This was supposed to be our family home. Evelyn looked at him steadily. Family isn't built on granite or hardwood, Daniel. It's built on love and respect. And right now, this house has neither. His shoulders slumped. What if we can't recover from this? Evelyn placed a hand on his arm. Then maybe you'll build something better. Something real. The wind rustled the trees, carrying away his unanswered fears. Days later, Claire returned, furious. She barged into Evelyn's small house uninvited. "How dare you sell our home?" she shouted. Evelyn calmly closed the book she was reading. "Correction, my share of the home." Claire's voice rose higher. "You've destroyed everything. Everyone's talking about us." Evelyn's gaze was level. "You destroyed it yourself with arrogance and cruelty. People will talk for a week and then move on. What lasts is how we treat each other." Claire laughed bitterly. "You think you're the hero here. You're just a bitter old woman." Evelyn stood, her voice strong. "No. I'm a woman who finally remembered her worth. And you'll have to live with that." Claire's eyes burned, but she had no reply. She slammed the door so hard the walls rattled. Evelyn exhaled slowly, steady as stone, knowing she would not be shaken again. Margaret called with updates. "Several offers already," she said cheerfully. Evelyn listened, heart steady. She had expected guilt, but what she felt instead was release. She walked into her garden, phone still at her ear, and smiled at the orange marigolds blooming. "Accept the best one," she told Margaret. "Let's move forward." The decision felt like exhaling after holding her breath for years. Later Daniel arrived, his face pale. "Is it true? You're accepting an offer?" Evelyn nodded. "Yes. It's final." He sank onto the porch step. "I don't know how to face this." Evelyn sat beside him. "One day at a time. Just like everyone else." He stared at the ground, silent. Evelyn reached out and squeezed his shoulder gently. "You'll survive, Daniel. And maybe you'll even learn." His eyes brimmed, but he nodded slowly. For once, he didn't argue. News spread that the sale was closing. Claire packed her things and left permanently, posting one last dramatic message about betrayal. Evelyn read it and felt only a flicker of sadness for her son. Daniel moved into a small apartment near his work. When he invited Evelyn to see it, she was surprised. The place was modest. Second-hand furniture, bare walls, but it was clean and his. "I'm cooking dinner," he said shyly, stirring pasta. Evelyn smiled warmly. "That's a first." He laughed nervously. "I guess I have to learn." As they ate at the little table, Evelyn realized this was the most honest meal they'd shared in years. No fancy settings, no hidden payments, just food and conversation. Daniel finally looked like a man, not a dependent child. She left that night quietly hopeful for him. Weeks later, Evelyn signed the final papers. A check slid across Margaret's desk into her hand. 6 figures, crisp and undeniable. Evelyn held it, not with greed, but with quiet vindication. She had not destroyed her son's life. She had saved her own. Margaret smiled softly. "What will you do with it?" Evelyn thought for a moment. "Live. Maybe travel. Maybe take a class." Margaret nodded. "You've earned it." Walking out into the sunlight, Evelyn felt lighter. The city bustled around her. And for the first time in years, she wasn't weighed down by invisible debts. She had her freedom back, and with it, the chance to write the rest of her story. She tucked the check safely into her bag and walked with her head high, her steps steady, her spirit unbroken. That evening Evelyn sat on her porch, sipping tea as twilight painted the sky. Daniel called. His voice quieter than she'd ever heard. "Mom, I just wanted to say, thank you. Not for the money. For finally making me stand on my own." Evelyn's eyes misted, though her smile was steady. "That's all I ever wanted, Daniel. For you to live your life, not lean on mine." He promised to visit that weekend just to spend time. She hung up, heart swelling. Mrs. Lewis waved from across the fence, and Evelyn waved back. The marigolds glowed in the fading light, bright and unyielding. She whispered to the night, "We did it, Thomas. I found my strength again." And for the first time in years she felt truly free, her future wide open, waiting for her next chapter. The weekend arrived, and Daniel came to Evelyn's small house with groceries in hand. "I thought we could cook together," he said awkwardly, holding up a bag of vegetables and pasta. Evelyn raised an eyebrow but smiled. "Cooking, Daniel? That's new." He chuckled nervously. "I'm learning." In the kitchen, he chopped onions badly and Evelyn teased, "Your father would have wept at those cuts." Daniel laughed, a genuine sound she hadn't heard in years. Over dinner, he admitted, "I didn't realize how much you were carrying for us." "I'm sorry, Mom." Evelyn's heart softened. Apology accepted. "But Daniel, remember, sorry means nothing without change." He nodded, serious this time. "I'll do better. I promise." For the first time since the confrontation in the kitchen weeks earlier, Evelyn believed him. She saw a glimpse of the son she thought she'd lost to entitlement. Meanwhile, whispers in the community shifted. Some still criticized Evelyn, but others admired her courage. At church, a woman approached shyly after service. "You're Evelyn Gray, aren't you? The one who stood up to her children." Evelyn smiled gently. "I suppose that's me." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "My daughter drains me too. I didn't think I had the right to say no. But you showed me I could." Evelyn hugged her warmly. "You always have the right to say no." Word of her actions spread like folklore, a story of a mother who demanded respect. Evelyn hadn't sought attention, but she realized her choices rippled outward, giving others courage. Later, Mrs. Lewis teased, "You're becoming famous, Evelyn." She laughed. "If I'm famous, let it be for reminding women we're more than wallets." The laughter felt light, honest, and healing. One afternoon, Claire's mother called Evelyn directly. "We need to talk," she said stiffly. Evelyn agreed, though she braced herself. At the cafe, Mrs. Hartman looked exhausted. "Claire blames you for everything," she began. Evelyn sipped her tea. "Of course she does. That's easier than looking in the mirror." Mrs. Hartman sighed. "I can't excuse her words to you. They were cruel. But I worry about my daughter. She's lost." Evelyn leaned forward. "We all get lost when we think life owes us something. She'll find her way if she wants to." There was a pause. Mrs. Hartman whispered, "You're stronger than I gave you credit for." Evelyn smiled faintly. "I wasn't strong before. I was desperate to be loved." Strength came when I stopped begging for crumbs. Mrs. Hartman looked down, ashamed. I hope Claire learns that lesson one day. Daniel's new apartment slowly became a home. He invited Evelyn over more often, proudly showing her small improvements. A rug, a second-hand sofa, framed photos on the wall. "Look, Mom, I even bought curtains," he said, laughing at himself. Evelyn teased. "And here I thought you couldn't live without granite countertops." He grinned sheepishly. Over takeout, Daniel opened up. "Claire keeps calling, but I don't know if I can forgive her. She wanted me to cut you off completely. She said choosing her meant abandoning you." Evelyn studied him. "Marriage should never demand cruelty as proof of love. If she loved you, she'd want peace between us." He looked pained. "Do you think I made a mistake marrying her?" Evelyn reached across the table. "I think mistakes can become lessons, Daniel. What matters is whether you learn from them." Evelyn joined a pottery class at the community center, something she had dreamed of for years. The clay felt cool and pliable under her fingers, shaping into bowls and cups with surprising grace. The instructor, a cheerful man named Harold, encouraged her progress. "You've got a natural touch," he said. Evelyn laughed. "Or maybe I've just had years of practice shaping stubborn lives." The class chuckled, and she felt lighter than she had in ages. After class, she showed Daniel her first uneven bowl. He smiled proudly. "That's beautiful, Mom," Evelyn teased. "It wobbles when you set it down, but it's mine." He held it like treasure. "That's the point, isn't it? Imperfect but real." Evelyn nodded. For the first time, she felt her life was her own creation. Flawed, maybe, but authentic and steady, molded by her own hands. Months later, Evelyn received a letter from the buyers of Daniel's old house. They thanked her for maintaining the property so well and invited her for tea. Curious she went. The young couple welcomed her warmly, their toddler toddling across the shiny hardwood. Evelyn walked through rooms filled with laughter and toys instead of tension. She smiled at the sight. "It's beautiful," she told them. As she left, Daniel asked quietly, "Does it hurt seeing strangers in the house?" Evelyn shook her head. "No. Feels right. Houses aren't families. People are." He nodded thoughtfully. That evening he confessed, "I was terrified you'd hate me forever." Evelyn hugged him tightly. "I could never hate you. But I had to wake you up. Now you're awake, Daniel. Don't go back to sleep." His eyes misted as he whispered, "I won't, Mom." Claire reappeared unexpectedly at Evelyn's door one rainy evening. Her mascara was smudged, her eyes hollow. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. Evelyn hesitated, then opened the door. They sat at the table in silence until Claire finally spoke. "I didn't realize how much you gave. I just thought money was endless. I was wrong." Evelyn studied her carefully. "It wasn't just money, Claire. It was my time, my love, my trust. You treated all of it as disposable." Claire's voice cracked. "I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm asking." Evelyn sighed. "Forgiveness isn't a gift to you. It's a release for me. I can forgive, but that doesn't mean forgetting. Respect has to be earned." Claire nodded, tears falling. For the first time, Evelyn saw her not as an enemy, but as a lost young woman learning a painful truth. After Claire left, Evelyn sat quietly, reflecting. Thomas's photograph still sat on her mantel, his smile eternal. "You'd laugh at me now, wouldn't you?" she whispered, standing up like a warrior after all these years. In her heart, she felt his approval, as though he were proud. She realized she had carried his memory as a shield and sometimes as a weight. But now she walked lighter. She didn't need validation from the dead or the living. She had her own. That night, she journaled for the first time in decades, writing about strength, loss, and the power of saying no. Her words flowed freely, each sentence a small victory. By the end, she smiled at the page. This was her story now, not one written by obligation, but by choice. And for once, she was the main character. Daniel began visiting weekly, bringing simple meals he cooked himself. Evelyn teased, Who knew my son would turn into a chef? He laughed. Don't get carried away. It's just pasta and chicken. But she saw pride in his eyes. One evening over dinner he said, Mom, I've been thinking of going back to school. Maybe get a certification in project management. Something steady. Evelyn beamed. That's wonderful, Daniel. Building your own path will give you more than money ever could. He nodded. I want to stand on my own. I don't want my children, if I have any, to grow up thinking dependence is normal. Evelyn felt tears sting her eyes. That's the best gift you could ever give me. They clinked glasses of water, a quiet toast to new beginnings, one built on respect and growth instead of silent sacrifice. Evelyn's pottery improved, and soon she sold her pieces at a small weekend market. Shoppers admired her cups and bowls, simple but filled with heart. One woman bought a set and said, There's soul in these. Evelyn smiled, feeling proud. Daniel came by to help carry boxes. Look at you, Mom, running a business, he teased. She laughed. A very small one, but it's mine. The stall became more than income, it was community. People asked about her story, and she shared pieces carefully, leaving out the bitterness and focusing on resilience. Strangers encouraged her, and Evelyn realized she was building a new family, one made of kindness, not blood. At night, she stacked unsold bowls on her shelves. Each imperfect piece reminded her of survival. Cracked, scarred, yet still whole. That was her too. Fragile, resilient, and unbreakable. Claire eventually reached out again, this time inviting Evelyn for coffee. Evelyn hesitated but agreed. At the cafe, Claire looked calmer, more grounded. I've started therapy, she admitted. I realized I was trying to fill emptiness with appearances. Evelyn nodded. That's a hard truth to face. Claire's voice wavered. Daniel doesn't want to see me yet, but I hope one day he will. I just wanted to thank you for forcing me to face myself. Evelyn studied her, surprised by the sincerity. If you mean that, then use this chance wisely. Respect isn't built in a day. Claire nodded. I know. I'll try. Evelyn left the cafe thoughtful. People could change. Not always, but sometimes. Whether Claire did or not was her choice. Evelyn had learned she could forgive without surrendering her peace. That balance was freedom. One spring morning, Evelyn received a letter from a women's group inviting her to speak. They wanted her to share her story of boundaries and resilience. She laughed at first. Me, a speaker? But Daniel encouraged her. Mom, people need to hear you. You've inspired me, and you don't even know it. Nervously, she agreed. At the small hall, she told her story in simple words. How generosity without respect becomes a cage. How saying no is not cruelty but survival. Women in the audience nodded, some wiping tears. Afterward, several approached her with gratitude. Evelyn realized her pain had become fuel for others' courage. Driving home, she felt lighter than ever. She had once feared being invisible. Now, her voice carried beyond her own walls. She was not just surviving anymore, she was teaching others how to thrive. Daniel came with flowers the day after her speech. Mom, you were amazing, he said proudly. Evelyn laughed. I was terrified. My knees were shaking. He grinned. No one noticed. They only saw your strength. They sat in her living room, sipping tea, the flowers bright on the table. You've changed, Daniel admitted. You're stronger but also happier. Evelyn smiled. That's what happens when you stop living for everyone else and start living for yourself. He nodded slowly. I think I'm starting to understand that. Evelyn reached for his hand. Good. Because one day if you have children you'll need to teach them the same. Generosity is beautiful, but not when it erases you. Daniel squeezed her hand tightly. I'll remember, Mom. Evelyn believed him. For the first time, hope wasn't a dream. It was reality blooming before her eyes. Evelyn's pottery market expanded. She was invited to showcase at a local arts fair, and Daniel volunteered to help set up. The fair bustled with color, music, and laughter. Evelyn stood behind her table, watching strangers admire her work. "You made these?" one young girl asked, eyes wide. Evelyn nodded. "With my own hands." The girl grinned. "They're beautiful." Evelyn's chest warmed. Daniel leaned over. "See, Mom. People see the value in what you do." She smiled. "For years, I gave value away without asking for recognition. Now I create and share on my own terms." That night, as they packed up, Daniel hugged her tightly. "I'm proud of you," Evelyn whispered back. "And I'm proud of you too. We both grew up this year." The stars glimmered above, and Evelyn felt like the universe itself was nodding in approval. On a quiet evening, Evelyn sat on her porch, journal in her lap. She wrote about the journey, betrayal, courage, and renewal. She wrote about Daniel's growth, Claire's mistakes, her own rediscovery. She ended with a sentence that made her smile. "I am no longer invisible." Closing the journal, she looked at the sky where the first stars appeared. The marigolds glowed faintly in the dusk, symbols of resilience. Daniel called just then, his voice light. "Mom, I got a promotion." Evelyn cheered. "That's wonderful, Daniel." He laughed. "I couldn't have done it without you showing me I had to stand tall." Evelyn whispered. "You did it yourself, son." After the call, she leaned back, heart peaceful. She had walked through fire and come out whole. And now, her life stretched ahead, not as a burden, but as a gift she finally claimed. Summer brought warmth and laughter to Evelyn's little house. Daniel visited often, sometimes bringing friends who wanted to meet the mother who stood her ground. Evelyn would laugh and shake her head, but she noticed how proud he seemed when he introduced her. Over iced tea, one friend said, "You taught him more than school ever could." Evelyn smiled modestly. "Life has its own lessons." Daniel's shoulders straightened with quiet dignity. For years he had leaned on her. Now he stood taller, and she was proud to watch. Evelyn tended her marigolds. Their orange faces turned to the sun, and thought, "This is healing." She didn't need approval anymore. She had peace, a garden, her art, and a son learning to be his own man. That was enough. Claire reached out again, this time with humility. She asked to meet Daniel at a neutral cafe, and Evelyn accompanied him for support. Claire looked thinner, humbled. "I've made mistakes," she admitted. "I thought appearances mattered more than respect. I was wrong." Daniel crossed his arms. "You asked me to cut off my mother. That's not something I forget easily." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "I was scared of losing control. I wanted the world to think we were perfect." Evelyn placed a hand gently on Daniel's arm. "Perfection isn't love, Claire. Respect is." The conversation ended without promises, but with possibility. Evelyn saw growth in both of them. Maybe their paths would cross again, maybe not. But either way, the truth had been spoken. And that mattered more than reconciliation. Evelyn spent more time at her pottery wheel. The whir of the machine, the cool clay in her hands, the shape forming beneath her fingers, it was therapy. Each bowl she created felt like a chapter of her story. Imperfect, dirty, useful. At the weekend market, she chatted easily with strangers, laughing, telling snippets of her journey when asked. One woman said, "You've got a light about you." Evelyn smiled. "That's what happens when you stop dimming yourself for others." She sold 3 bowls and a vase that day, enough to cover her week's expenses. Walking home, she realized she no longer measured life by sacrifices or debts. She measured it by joy, creativity, and dignity. That shift was more valuable than any check she had ever written. Daniel began taking evening classes. He called Evelyn excitedly after his first exam. "Mom, I passed with an A." She cheered into the phone. "I knew you could." His confidence grew with each passing week. Evelyn noticed he stopped asking for money altogether. Instead, he shared his plans, his struggles, his dreams. She listened, proud of the man he was becoming. One night he admitted, "I wish Dad were here to see this." Evelyn squeezed the phone. "He'd be proud, Daniel. Just as I am." Tears welled in her eyes after the call, but they were good tears, the kind that washed away sorrow and left space for hope. She whispered to Thomas's memory, "Our boy finally found his feet." The quiet house answered with the sound of peace. Evelyn began writing more in her journal. What started as scattered reflections turned into full stories, about love, sacrifice, betrayal, and rebirth. One evening Mrs. Lewis peeked at her notebook and said, "You should publish these." Evelyn laughed. "Who would read them?" Mrs. Lewis insisted. "More people than you think. Your voice has power." The idea lingered in Evelyn's mind. Could her story help others? She wasn't sure, but she kept writing. Her words flowed with honesty. Not polished, not perfect, but real. She realized she wasn't just recording memories. She was reclaiming them. Every sentence stitched dignity back into her life, like thread repairing a torn quilt. By the time she closed the notebook that night, Evelyn knew she had more to say than she'd ever allowed herself before. Invitations came for Evelyn to speak at other women's groups. She hesitated, but Daniel encouraged her. "Mom, your story gives people courage. Don't hide it." At one gathering, she told the audience, "Generosity without respect becomes chains. And chains must be broken." The room erupted in applause. Women lined up afterward, sharing their own stories of being overlooked, drained, or dismissed. Evelyn listened to each, offering encouragement. She realized her struggle wasn't unique. It was shared by countless others. That gave her purpose. Driving home that evening, she felt alive. Her pain had not been wasted. It had been transformed. She was no longer just Evelyn Gray, the mother who cancelled a wedding reception. She was Evelyn Gray, the woman who found her voice and used it to lift others. Daniel often attended her talks, standing quietly at the back of the room. After one event, he hugged her tightly. "You saved me, Mom," he whispered. Evelyn shook her head. "No, Daniel. You saved yourself when you chose to change." But inside, her heart swelled with gratitude. They had come full circle, from estrangement and anger to mutual respect. Daniel began helping at her pottery stall on weekends, proudly telling customers, "These are my mom's creations." Evelyn blushed but enjoyed the pride in his voice. For years she had been invisible to him, her sacrifices unnoticed. Now he saw her fully. That recognition was worth more than money, more than houses, more than any inheritance she could leave. It was the reward she had long craved, to be valued simply for being herself. Claire eventually moved out of town, starting over in another city. Rumors reached Evelyn that she was working, saving money, living more simply. Evelyn wished her no harm. In fact, she hoped Claire truly changed. Life had taught Evelyn that people could learn when pain forced them to. But whether Claire did or not was no longer Evelyn's burden. One evening she told Daniel, "If she finds her way back to you, forgive if you can. But never forget what respect means." Daniel nodded. "I won't, Mom." Evelyn smiled. She knew his heart was kinder than most, but now it was also wiser. That combination gave her hope for his future. Claire was a closed chapter for her. She had turned the page, and she had no intention of going backward. Evelyn traveled for the first time in years. She visited the coast, walked barefoot on the sand, and let the waves wash over her ankles. The sea air smelled of salt and freedom. She collected shells and thought about how life had shaped her like the ocean shapes stone, worn, smoothed, but still whole. Sitting on a bench overlooking the waves, she whispered, "I'm free, Thomas." For years she had been tethered by duty, by guilt, by silent expectation. Now she was bound only by her own choices. She returned home refreshed, carrying a small jar of seashells. On her mantel, next to Thomas's picture, they stood as symbols of journeys taken, lessons learned, and freedom reclaimed. Evelyn's pottery business thrived enough to fund small comforts. She bought herself a new recliner, a bright blue scarf, and treated Mrs. Lewis to lunch at a nice restaurant. "Look at you," Mrs. Lewis teased. "Spoiling yourself for once." Evelyn laughed. It feels strange but good. She realized that self-care wasn't selfish. It was survival. For decades she had poured everything into others and left nothing for herself. Now she relished small luxuries without guilt. Each new purchase wasn't about money. It was about permission. Permission to live, to enjoy, to be visible. The recliner became her favorite spot for reading, journaling, and daydreaming. And each time she wrapped the blue scarf around her shoulders, she felt like a queen reclaiming her throne. Daniel graduated from his certification program and invited Evelyn to the ceremony. She sat in the audience, heart swelling as he walked across the stage in cap and gown. His smile searched for her in the crowd, and when their eyes met, he mouthed, "Thank you." Tears blurred her vision, but her smile never faltered. Afterward, he hugged her tightly. "I couldn't have done this without you pushing me to stand on my own." Evelyn whispered back, "I just reminded you of your strength." They celebrated with dinner at a small cafe, laughter filling the evening. Watching her son beam with pride, Evelyn realized that letting go had given him wings. And watching him soar was the sweetest reward she could have imagined. Evelyn's talks eventually led to an invitation to contribute a chapter to a book about resilience. She hesitated, doubting her words, but Daniel encouraged her. "Mom, your story will help people. Write it." She poured her heart into the chapter, writing about betrayal, courage, and the power of saying no. When the book was published, she held it in her hands, stunned. Her name printed there felt surreal. She thought of the Evelyn who had once been invisible in her own home and smiled. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone unafraid to speak, to claim, to inspire. The book found readers, and Evelyn received letters of gratitude. Each one reminded her that her voice mattered. That was worth more than any inheritance she could have given. Time softened the sharp edges of anger. Daniel grew steadily, thriving in his career, living responsibly. Evelyn flourished with her pottery, her speaking engagements, and her writing. She built a life that was truly hers. Sometimes memories of the painful kitchen confrontation resurfaced. But they no longer stung. Instead, they served as reminders of how far she had come. Evelyn once thought her story ended in sacrifice. Now, she knew it was only beginning. The marigolds in her garden bloomed brighter each year, a symbol of resilience and rebirth. Neighbors often stopped to admire them, and Evelyn would smile, saying, "They bloom because they're cared for. Just like people." And in those simple words lay her truth. On her 65th birthday, Daniel surprised Evelyn with a small party. Friends, neighbors, and women she had inspired gathered in her backyard. Laughter filled the air, and candles flickered on a homemade cake. Daniel raised a toast. "To my mom, the strongest woman I know. She taught me that love isn't about money. It's about respect." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears as the crowd clapped. For once, the celebration was truly about her. Not her giving, not her sacrifices, but her worth. She blew out the candles, whispering a wish. "May I always remember my strength." That night, lying in bed, she realized the wish had already come true. Evelyn's story came full circle. She had started as a mother desperate for her son's approval, ready to give everything. She had been told to disappear, dismissed, treated as disposable. But she had chosen a different ending. She stood her ground, reclaimed her dignity, and built a new life filled with creativity, respect, and love. Daniel had grown too, from entitled and dependent to responsible and grateful. And though Claire had drifted away, her absence no longer haunted Evelyn. Sitting on her porch at sunset, journal in hand, Evelyn wrote her final words for the day. "Strength is remembering your worth even when others forget it."